see we have a very sizable quorum of 31 people, around 100 people confirmed. So we expect the rest to join us as we go along. So good afternoon, good morning from wherever you are tuned in today. I'll start first of all by introducing myself. My name is Rose Rono. I am the founder and executive director at TradeSmart Consult. We are a consultancy firm, a Pan-African consultancy firm based in Nairobi, Kenya. And we support women economic empowerment initiatives, international trade, SME development, private sector development, amongst other areas. We started, TradeSmart was started in 2020. And we started, the opportunity we saw in the market was low intra-Africa trade, the negative balance that are there between African countries, the lack of information of the available economic opportunities, lack of coordinated and meaningful public participation, public-private sector partnership, and also there's the increased need by enterprises in the private sector for business support services. So that is the opportunity we saw and set up TradeSmart in June 2020. And it's been a wonderful journey. And in that journey, we've been able to support a lot of initiatives, and one of which we are most proud of is supporting the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is a topic of discussion today, specifically on the rules of origin. Our mission is accelerating intra-Africa trade through innovative trade solutions. And such a platform as a webinar helps us to be able to disseminate that information in order for us to be able to achieve our vision and mission. In terms of our core values, we have values of honesty, excellence, Africanity, reliability, and also teamwork. So as I mentioned earlier, our service offering is on private sector development, capacity building and training, policy advocacy, research and innovation, and we really focus on women economic empowerment, youth, SME. So those are the areas that we really focus, ensuring that they have the opportunities. So we have different stakeholders, private sector associations, micro, small, and medium enterprises, and now we are starting to even support large enterprises, women entrepreneurs, youth entrepreneurs, African governments. We advise African governments, regional economic communities, development partners, educational institutions, and also think tanks. So in terms of our partners, those are some of just a few of the partners that we do have who help us from day to day to be able to ensure that we are delivering our mandate. So in today's session, we are going to be talking about the Africa Continental Free Trade area, specifically in relation to the rules of origin that underpin this particular agreement. And we do have a special guest with us. He's Mr. Josiah Rotich, who is an experienced trade and economic policy expert with over around 25 years experience in this area of trade and economic policy. In addition to the experience that he has spearheaded several trade negotiations in different agreements such as the ESC, EU Economic Partnership Negotiations, COMESA, ESC, SADC, tripartite negotiations. As the lead negotiator for ESC, the CFTA, that is the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. He was the key negotiator specifically for rules of origin, and that's why we felt it was important for us to have him today as a chief guest. He's been also the chair of the technical working group on rules of origin in the CFTA since the negotiations commenced. He has also worked in the past at the Kenyan Embassy in Brussels as a commercial counselor for 6 years. That is a period of from 2022 to 2009, covering EU, Belgium, Luxembourg, African, Caribbean, and the Pacific partner states, and also the World Customs Organization. He holds a postgraduate degree from Brussels University on international economic law, diploma in multilateral diplomacy, conferencing from United Nations Institute of Trade Research, a Bachelor of Arts from in Economics from Moi University, among several other trainings that he's been able to undertake in his career. Rotich is very respected in trade matters, not only in Kenya, but also in the continent. So I would want to welcome Mr. Rotich. If you can come on and mute yourself, and let us have this discussion on the rules of origin. So my team from StraightSmart kindly spotlight Mr. Rotich so that we can have both of us having this discussion on the rules of origin.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Rose. I believe you hear me.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear, and welcome to our discussion today. So maybe you can say something a bit about the CFTA before we can go to some of the questions that we have and some of the questions that the participants might have specifically on this issue of the CFTA and the rules of origin.
Okay, thank you very much once again, and welcome colleagues and other participants. I just wanted to say that is a unique opportunity that we are engaging on matters CFTA, particularly on the rules of origin. I just wanted to say that the CFTA in totality, I think, is something that we need to be proud of as Africans. It is not one of those things that you find in other continents, particularly the speed at which we moved on. And there were so many doubting Thomases, but now we have it. We need to make it work. The CFTA actually is, as I was saying, an important aspect in Africa because it is one of those instruments that were meant to enhance or rather boost intra-African trade. And I believe it is going to do so, given the fact that we have got the political will from the top going downwards. So the CFTA where we are right now is more or less all the instruments that are necessary to implement it have been completed. There are a few issues that are still outstanding in different areas, but those are not the critical things that can make the CFTA start functional. The trade in goods instruments, the trade in services, critical instruments have been finalized. So we can start actually trading under the CFTA. And of course, it has started under the guided trade initiative. So in a nutshell, I think this is something that we need to be proud of as Africans, and we need to make it work in all aspects of it. Of course, the rules of origin is one of the critical aspects about it. So I think we can go straight to the rules of origin and see how we can move on.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Mr. Rotich. For the benefit for those who are new and to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, it's basically a free trade agreement that brings together 54 African countries, with the exception of Eritrea, to create a single African market. So today we are going to focus more in terms of the rules of trade for that particular agreement. And I want to just start by asking Mr. Rotich to explain to us what rules of origin is. What is it? You know, it's such a technical term that only us trade experts sometimes might have, such knowledge. What does it mean, and why is it important in a trade agreement such as the Africa Continental Free Trade Area?
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Rose again. Okay, the rules of origin are basically, in simple terms, the economic citizenship or economic nationality of a product. In an FTA, we will be trading on goods and services. So for the goods to be traded under the preferential terms, they must qualify under particular conditions. So rules of origin, basically, if you want to call it in a simple term, is economic nationality of a particular product. Just the same way a human being becomes a citizen of a country by different ways. I can talk about Kenya. For you to become a citizen of Kenya, you must be born in Kenya, maybe by naturalization, being born by parents. One of them is a Kenyan, another one is from another continent, and many other ways you become a citizen. Once you become a citizen, you can be called a Kenyan citizen on the basis of those conditions or other requirements. For a product to be called a Kenyan product, it must qualify under certain conditions. So these conditions are the ones that you're calling the rules of origin. So when you hear people saying that we are negotiating rules of origin, they are basically setting out the conditions in which a product becomes a nationality, economic national of that particular country. Just like a human being becomes a citizen of a country, there are certain conditions. For a product, there are certain conditions. These conditions are the rules of origin that we are talking about. Basically, that in a nutshell. And maybe just to...
Yes, go ahead, yeah.
Okay, and maybe just to say the importance of the rules of origin in an FTA. I always call the rules of origin the back wheels of a car. If you got the front wheels and you don't have the back wheels, that car will not move. If you have got an FTA and you have dealt with tariffs, you are saying you are reducing tariffs or you are eliminating completely. If you have not developed rules of origin, which will facilitate that particular agreement to work, that particular agreement will not work. It's just like a car without the back wheels. So in that case, they are very critical, because if a product is going to benefit from a preferential treatment, because an FTA is about reducing duties or eliminating them completely, you're talking about preferences. If a product is not going to qualify under the set out conditions that we have talked about, you cannot be given preferential treatment. So this is how important the rules of origin are. And of course, the rules of origin will be important in terms of complexity of it or the flexibility of it. The more the complex, the more the difficult in terms of implementing that particular agreement. So the rules of origin actually are equally important, like the tariffs. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Mr. Rotich. I want to talk to the participants. If you have a question, please put it on the chat, and also feel free to introduce yourself on the chat and leave us your contacts so that you can get a recording of this. But I just want to paraphrase or even just put it in very simple terms, and so that you tell me whether I have understood this correctly. That rules of origin basically allow products from a preferential territory, such as the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, products from those countries to access preferential treatment in terms of the reduced tariffs that have initially been negotiated in that agreement. Is that correct? So that the products which are from outside that territory, for example, outside Africa, might not be able to access the same rights. Have I put it very clearly?
You have put it very correctly in terms of the importance of the rules of origin. I think you are saying it even in a more simplified manner, that we are talking about a club called AfCFTA for this particular matter. So if you don't belong to that particular club, you should not benefit from it in whatever form. So the rules of origin actually will ensure that if you are not part of this particular framework, you should not benefit. And I give you maybe examples. If you are going to export from Nairobi to Dakar, Senegal, products that are coming from China, you should not benefit from the preferential treatment because you're not part of this particular framework. So the rules of origin actually will determine whether or not you are part of this particular framework and whether or not you should benefit from exporting to Africa under the preferential terms. And that is basically what you should not have a free lunch if you are not part of the club. Because being part of the CFTA, you also have a cost that you're paying. By reducing duties, you're paying a cost. But you should not pay a cost and then another country comes in and benefit from that particular framework. So that is also maybe the importance of the rules of origin in terms of facilitating trade and at the same time ensuring that it is only the members of that particular framework that benefits from the preferential trade.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rotich, on that. And my second question is, maybe you can elaborate more on the different types of rules of origin and how they affect trade. Okay,
the rules of origin basically are two types. I have one of the rules of origin types is the preferential rules of origin. The preferential rules of origin are rules of origin that are applicable in a preferential framework like the one we have in the CFTA. So the rules of origin that we are developing and utilizing in the CFTA, these are preferential rules of origin, because these are the ones that will determine whether or not you will benefit from the preferences. Now, but there is another type which is statistical purposes, which non-preferential rules of origin. Non-preferential rules of origin is actually rules of origin that just determines where the product is coming from. It doesn't matter whether you're in a framework or you are not in a framework, but just to indicate that this product is coming from Japan, this product is coming from Australia, this product is coming from Brazil, for just purposes of statistical purposes, and also it is also being utilized or rather used in cases where you have got trade remedies issues, particularly if you have got issues of dumping, issues of subsidization, and you want to discipline those particular practices. You will want to know where that particular product is coming from. For instance, if a product coming from Australia is actually being subsidized and it is causing problems in your market, distorting the market, you want to discipline. So how will you know that this particular product is coming from Australia? Is by just knowing the origin of that particular product. Whether it is originating from Australia or just coming out of Australia but from another country, you need to know where is this particular product is coming from, so that you will know at what point are you going to utilize those trade remedies instruments. So basically those two types of rules of origin are the ones that are very common. But the one that we are focusing on in Africa is the preferential rules of origin. But of course, when you look at, if you go deeply again and say, yeah, those are the two types. But when you come to the preferential rules of origin, you can still classify them under two different types. You can call them criteria. One of them is if a product is obtained from a country, from maybe through mining, maybe a natural product like crops that you plant, tea, coffee, and such like things, you can produce products because they are, you just get them in their primary form without any manufacturing. But again, now the second part of it, or the second type of it, is when a product is manufactured. Take, for example, a telephone. If a telephone is being traded by Kenya, how do you consider that a Kenyan product? It is going to be classified under the second part of it. Not a wholly obtained product, but it is a manufactured product which must have been substantially, or rather, which must have gone through substantial transformation. You must have added a lot of value. So in this case, we are talking about two types of rules of origin again. It's either wholly obtained or it is substantially produced. When it is substantially produced, you have got different levels of testing. How much do you call a product an originating product in Kenya by adding value to this level, or by using a different tests, like maybe changing the classification in terms of the tariffs, whether the raw material is from another heading and the final product is in another heading. So that is already a determination that it must have gone through a substantial transformation. And of course, you can also use a particular process to say, if you are following this particular process, you are going to have already qualified or rather added value to a larger extent. So in that case, we are talking about two different types of rules of origin, preferential and non-preferential. And also when you come to preferential, you also talk about either it is wholly obtained or it is manufactured. In the manufacturing, it must have gone through really substantial level of processing.
Thank you so much. I think your answer has been very comprehensive. I just want to request, could you give us an example of a wholly obtained product in the CFTA, and also an example of substantial transformation, just for purposes of making it as simple as possible for everybody to understand?
Okay, a wholly obtained product is like if you are selling your cows, the cows, cows, that cow is a wholly obtained product, because it is just a cow that you have there and you're selling it in whole. You are not talking about the products from a cow, the cow itself. You are also talking about maybe tea in their raw form. You're talking about coffee in their raw form. Talking about cotton in their raw form. You're talking about gold, diamond in their raw form. or maybe timber in their raw form. So those are the things that you can call them wholly obtained. But in terms of the products that are manufactured, which you can call now substantially transformed, is if you are selling, for instance, edible oil, the cooking oil that we all use, you see that is already a processed product. You will be using raw materials from another chapter or another heading. You process it to a certain level that you can call it now a processed product. A telephone, like I talked about, a telephone, you get raw materials from another heading, but the final product, which is the telephone, is processed, which is in another heading. In a nutshell, if you look at the way the nomenclature, the way the products has been classified, because all the products that you see must be having a code number and a description. So from chapter 1 to chapter 24, basically, those are mainly agricultural products, which are by and large, they are wholly obtained products. Apart from now, when you go to another level, you have coffee, but you can go to processed coffee, you can go to Nescafe, you can go to all that. But in its primary form, it is a wholly obtained product, which is from chapter 1 to chapter 24, in the way the products has been classified. And then from chapter 25 to the last chapter, which is chapter 97, more or less those are manufactured products, which you now don't, you never talk about wholly obtained, but you'll be talking about manufacturing or processing to a particular level that you have agreed in the negotiations.
Thank you so much for that. I know the participants in this would need maybe detailed information. Just to inform you, we'll be sharing the appendix, which has the specific rules of origin, because for each HS code or for each product, there is a specific rule of origin that has been agreed. And I think maybe at this point, I would just like to request, or even first of all, before I ask you in terms of how far we are in terms of negotiating the rules of origin under the CFTA, I just want to give you a scenario. If I was to import seeds from, let's say, Sweden, I plant them in Kenya, and then when let's say it's maize, when the maize is harvested, I'm exporting the maize to let's say Nigeria. Would it qualify as wholly obtained?
Yes, it will qualify, because you are talking about seeds are in another chapter. And then it doesn't matter where that seed is coming from. You are planting it in Kenya, and you are now harvesting the maize in Kenya. So you talk about harvesting the maize in Kenya and export, which is a CFTA country, and exporting to another CFTA country. So clearly that product qualifies under the wholly obtained.
So how about a second scenario of raw materials coming from different countries within the same territory? I think maybe I'm alluding to the aspect of accumulation. Maybe you can talk a bit about it.
Okay, if you and I think that what Madam Rose is talking about now is the second part of substantial transformation. And when you are doing substantial transformation, you will be allowed to use materials from within the territory. The territory in this case is the CFTA. So whatever resources that you are going to get from any CFTA country, that raw material is considered to be domestic. So in this, for the purposes of the rules of origin for the CFTA countries are domestic. When I'm getting cotton from Senegal, again, it's like I'm getting cotton from just my country here, because we are considering now the CFTA as a one territory in terms of sourcing raw materials. So if we use materials from any country within Africa, unlimited, you qualify, because you are considering those particular raw materials to be domestic raw materials, like you are getting from your own country. That's basically what you're calling them accumulation, full accumulation.
Okay. And maybe you can, since you are heavily participating and leading the process of negotiating the rules of origin under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, maybe you can tell us just the process of negotiation of specifically that, and what is the status now, what is outstanding, and if we can be able to use it even with the outstanding areas that have not yet been negotiated.
Okay, the way the rules of origin were negotiated as a process is that when the framework, when the institutions of the rules of, of the CFTA negotiations were constituted, the technical working group on rules of origin was also constituted. So in that case, we have got different technical working groups dealing with different subject matters. We have one on rules of origin, we have got one on SPS, one on other matters. So on the rules of origin, the technical working group is the one that was mandated to negotiate. Now, once that was constituted, the question was, where are we going to start? Are we going to start from a particular background, or we start from the blues? And the answer was no. First of all, we must do a situational analysis. The situational analysis was to kind of determine, or rather, what is it that is obtaining in the different regs of Africa. Remember, we have got, I think, 8 recognized regs within the African Union. Now, in those regs, we have got rules of origin in each of them. So the first thing that needed to be done was, since we are coming up with the rules of origin for Africa, and Africa, we have got different regs with the different rules of origin for their frameworks. So how are we going to move on? So we said, first of all, look at what is it that is obtaining. So that situational analysis was done, and also vis-a-vis what is also obtaining internationally. What is the best practice? And the best practice is something that can also assist you in terms of when you are developing a framework like this particular one. So that, first of all, had to be done. Once that one was completed, so the question was now that can we now sit down and negotiate rules of origin that are good for Africa? And the next thing that we also were asking ourselves is, okay, after all this, how do we harmonize? Can we now maybe develop particular principles that are going to guide us in terms of the discussions, what we need? Those particular principles also were agreed. Of course, they may not be written somewhere, but they were agreed in terms of one of the key principles that was agreed is that where we have got raw materials in Africa, we should use those particular materials, first of all, before we move out. I give you an example. If we have got cotton in one of the countries, say in Central Africa, Benin, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, or wherever it is, we should not rush to go and get those raw materials from where? From outside. First of all, utilize what is there. And then if it is not enough, you can go out. So that was a very key principle, because each and every country in the CFTA, they have got a particular raw material that they have a specific uniqueness. You talk of Kenya, we have got cotton, we have got tea, we have got coffee, we have got many other things. You go to another country, they have got different raw materials that we said, first of all, look at those ones. If they are available in Africa, we must utilize them. Number 2 is about the rules of origin. I said the rules of origin, if they are complex, even applying them is going to be difficult. So we agreed that the rules of origin that we are developing must be flexible. Flexible in the sense that they should be trade facilitating, because the main purpose of the rules of origin is to facilitate trade. So we say this particular rules of origin must facilitate trade. Number 2 is about they must be user-friendly. User-friendly in the sense that the people we are developing these rules of origin for may not have gone to school the way we have, and they must also understand how to utilize them. So we said they also must be user-friendly. And a few other principles that were agreed. Now, after that, each and every country now went back and say we are now developing our national position in terms of the rules of origin. That is now how the rules of origin were negotiated. Of course, you know, the rules of origin are in 2. There is the general rules of origin that is now defining the legal framework. What are the definitions of the terms that have been used in this particular framework? And also what could be the criteria and many other things. So that was one section of it. And then the second part is now the product specific rules, where you are talking about each and every product, like we had said, each and every product has got a name and a description. So each and every product has got a particular rule. So that if you are manufacturing cigarettes, you just focus on chapter 24, which is cigarette. You don't have to go to textiles. You don't have to go to chemicals because that is none of your business. As a business person, you just go to that particular chapter, you look at the rule, and then you do the protection. So that discussion now was based on now what I was saying, the materials that are available in each and every part of the African continent. Now the process of negotiation of the rules of origin is that the technical work group would agree on certain aspects, and then you take it now up to the next level, which is now the senior level for adoption, for approval, and further guidance if there are guidance that you need, particularly if you have got some outstanding matters that you need guidance. So that process went on all along up to where we are. So that basically is the process in terms of negotiating the rules of origin. Where you don't agree in a particular meeting, you ask for a timeout, you go back home, you do further consultation with the industry and the other stakeholders, and then you come back and then you continue the negotiations. Just to say, it was so, what can I say? It was so unique that we completed the negotiation of the rules of origin within a very, very short time, despite the fact that we are talking about a large number of people, that is the whole continent. But the time we took was extremely short compared to other frameworks that we have negotiated. If I may go to the next part of the question, Madam, is that what is outstanding now is that, as I say, there are two sections of the rules of origin. There is a legal framework, the general rules. In that one, everything has been concluded. The last matter that was concluded under the general rules was the issue of the SEZ, the special economic zones. And the question was, how do you deal with products that are being manufactured from a special economic zone? Because the others are being manufactured outside the zone, and there are those that are being manufactured within a special zone. So how are you going to deal with them? Are they going to be treated the same way? So that particular matter was meeting, the Council of Ministers that took place in Botswana. They agreed on how to deal with that particular matter. Now, on the product-specific rules of origin, we have got two critical sectors that are still outstanding. One of them is automobiles, that is Chapter 87. Chapter 87 has got it's a whole range of products. There are motor vehicles, there are tricycles or motorcycles. There are also what we call wheelchairs. We have got baby carriers. We have got many other things. So, but what is still outstanding majorly is about motor vehicles now. We have not agreed because of the divergencies, or rather, let me not call them divergencies, the specific interests by different part of the continent. So that particular matter is still outstanding. That's gone to the ministers. The ministers are trying to see how they can come up with a regional value chain so that you can have maybe, instead of saying a car made in Kenya, you say a car made in Africa, so that countries can focus on particular parts and we make a car from Africa. So that is the discussion that is there at the ministerial level. The second chapter, or rather sector that is still outstanding, is the textile. Textile is chapter 50 to chapter 63. That is also an area where we've got diverse interests in Africa, and we have got diverse levels of capacities. There are countries that already have got a huge capacity in terms of the production, and they are very well founded. And there are countries that are still starting. Some of the countries are still at the infant stages. So the issue is about how do we match, or rather how do we meet the two sectors, or rather the two interests. So that particular sector is still outstanding. And again, it's a sector that has got a lot of potential in terms of employment, in terms of economic development, industrialization, and everything else. So that is why it is still outstanding. Those are the only two chapters that are still, sectors that are still outstanding. The question that you will ask me next is that, so how do we apply now the rules of origin that has not been completed? When we were negotiating the rules of origin, particularly the general rules, it was clear that, and out of experience, it is clear that you may not conclude everything 100 out of 100. before you start implementing a particular agreement. So in the event that you will have a few outstanding matters, how do you start applying? So there is a transitional clause. I think this Article 42, if I can remember. That particular article talks about in the event that you conclude, you still have outstanding matters and you want to start implementing the CFTA itself, you can implement what has been agreed already as you continue negotiating on the outstanding matters. So the rules of origin are being implemented right now, despite the fact that the chapter on textiles and the sector on motor vehicles has not been concluded. On the strength of that particular article, the transitional clause, we are able to implement the rules of origin. What has been agreed on, you implement. What is not agreed on, you use the MFN treatment. MFN in the sense that you don't grant preferential terms. You just trade as if you are trading with that country. So basically, I think that is what I can say. I mean, based on the question that you asked.
So maybe just a follow-up question on what was agreed on the special economic zones. Maybe you can just give us an overview of what the ministers agreed on that.
Okay, what was agreed under this particular aspect is that the ministers were able to, first of all, appreciate that the special economic zones are very critical in terms of investment area, and also using them to attract investment. We use them in our countries. Number two is that the question was that, so how do you now harmonize the different conditions that we have in other countries? So the ministers agreed that each country is free to protect, if I may say, to put policies that are going to protect the market in terms of the distortion, because the fear was there is going to be market distortion. So the ministers were able to appreciate and say, each country is free to use policies that you want to use to protect or rather to remove the distortion. And they also indicated that apart from this, there are other instruments that we have which takes care of what we call practices that are not ethical in trade. So they talked about competition, the protocol on competition, the protocol, I mean the annex on trade remedies, to say that in the trade remedies, in the competition protocol, that this particular SEZ matter needs to be also reflected so that you can use the two. If you have got unfair competition because of you are producing from an SEZ, you can use the competition protocol. If you are also facing unfair competition from another country within the CFTA, you can use the trade remedies. The trade remedies actually cover safeguards, covers anti-dumping, it covers subsidization. So the ministers were able to say, okay, fine, those are three instruments that we can also use in terms of if you are facing any problem, you can use those particular instruments to take care of the distortion that we are fearing, all of us. And that actually opens to say that you can now trade without any fear because you have got instruments that can take care of any distortion that may arise. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So just in terms of, I think you mentioned this when we were starting the introduction on rules of origin. The rules of origin that have already been negotiated under the CFTA, would you consider them as being trade facilitating or promoting economic development, regional integration? Maybe you can make a comment on that. And also, how do our rules of origin that under the CFTA differ with others which have been negotiated in other regional trade agreements?
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Rose, on that. Now, the rules of origin that we have negotiated under the CFTA, I can call them trade facilitating. They actually facilitate trade because actually it qualifies under those principles that I talked about initially, that we were actually using in terms of guiding the discussion. Using the raw materials that are within Africa, the rules of origin must be flexible and they must be user-friendly. These rules of origin that we have negotiated actually qualifies, or rather complies to those particular principles. One, as I said, if you are going to use raw materials that are within Africa, all of us, we have got raw materials. And if we are going to use raw materials that we have within Africa, you are talking about development. If you buy my coffee, I buy your cotton. or I buy your timber from DRC, for instance, I am developing your country. And then number two, the rules of origin that we negotiated also really respects or rather promotes a regional value chain. If I'm making jackets or rather trousers in Kenya, and I don't have cotton, I go to Benin, I can buy cotton and come and use it in Kenya to make the fabric and then make the what we call, and make the suits or rather the t-shirt or the shirts that I'm making. Or I go to another country that is buying cotton from Benin, maybe make fabric and go and buy that particular fabric from there. Fabric is this, you go to the shop, cut for me 3 meters, 2 meters, that kind of a thing. So you bring it and do your t-shirts or your shirts, but you are not starting that particular process from there. So you are buying from within Africa, you are actually promoting a value chain. You are making t-shirts in Kenya, but you started the process from Benin, you come to another country, you come and make t-shirts in Kenya. That is a clear value chain promotion. And also a very clear developing the industry. As I buy cotton from wherever I'm buying from or the fabric, I am actually developing that industry in that particular country. Number two, in terms of the regional integration processes, you talked about accumulation. When I buy tobacco from Malawi and I come and do cigarettes in Kenya, I am as accumulation aspect, raw materials from another country in Africa, you use them and then you produce the final product. You are actually promoting the regional integration. And then the other thing about regional integration is that we continue respecting what is happening in the region, different regions. The fact that we have got CFTA rules of origin does not mean that you forget about what you have been doing in your region. You continue doing what you have been doing in your region as much as you undertook commitments there. So, and I can say, if you look at the rules of origin that we negotiated under the CFTA, they are different from what we have in other regions, but they are more or less the same to what we have in other regions. For the countries or other regions that are using the product specific, where every product has got a particular rule. Remember, I gave an example of tobacco. When you are doing cigarettes, you don't want to know what rules are there for motor vehicles, because that is none of your business. That is the product specific rules. But there are certain regions that are using general rules where we have got different sets of criteria, but you must test through all of them. So that is happening, I think, in West Africa or Central Africa, and maybe some other parts of Africa. But some other parts of Africa, they are basically the same as what we have in the CFTA. But all of us in Africa, we agreed on these rules. We appreciated the flexibility. We developed them and we owned. So these are the rules that we are using, and I can say in a nutshell, they are user-friendly, they facilitate trade, they are developmental in terms of promoting the regional value chain and also utilizing the raw materials that we have in Africa. Maybe the last point about that, the CFTA, one of the critical objectives was to post intra-African trade. We buy from each other. If we can use the same example I was using, if I'm buying from Benin, I'm promoting I'm enhancing the trade within ourselves. If Benin is buying suits or rather buying t-shirts, enhancing intra-African trade. So the moment you use now the raw materials that are within Africa, you are buying from me, I buy from you. It's like saying you scratch my back, I scratch yours. So actually this is one of the things that promotes or rather enhance the intra-Africa trade by insisting that we must utilize, first of all, the materials that we have in Africa before you get out of it. Thank you.
Okay, so just a scenario, do you think there could be a scenario whereby, for example, an exporter can compare the different rules of origin in the different recs and end up finding that the CFTA is not competitive and they would use another set of rules of origin?
Okay, that temptation is there. It's a real temptation, and I think it's a practical one, particularly if you are within a particular rec. I give you an example. If you are in EAC, maybe at one point you are saying the rules of origin for this particular product for the CFTA are more flexible. I can use them and not use the ESC rules of origin. That temptation is going to be there. And I think going forward, I'm almost sure that there has to be harmonization somehow. Not to say that all the rules are going to be collapsed, but I think there has to be some sort of harmonization so that you don't have this kind of temptation to say, this one is better than this one, I can use it. But you cannot use rules of origin for ESC to export to Tunisia or Algeria. You cannot. You can only use the ESC rules of origin to trade within the ESC and likewise to other X. But you can, within the ESC, you can say, I'm not using the ESC rules of origin. I want to use the CFTA rules of origin because they are more flexible. And I'm anyway a party to the CFTA. So that temptation is there, and I think somehow we need to see how we can harmonize that.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we don't have so much time left. I will go to some of the last questions that I have before we can go to the chat and see the questions that the participants have put up. And I want you just to comment in terms of the small and medium-sized enterprises. Do you think the rules of origin that have been negotiated are going to be beneficial to them? And then also maybe you can just highlight some of the challenges that you foresee in terms of implementing these rules of origin and how you think they can be addressed.
Okay, first of all, I want to say that the CFTA rules of origin and the CFTA in totality, the way it was envisioned by the leaders of Africa, must benefit everyone. Whether you are a multinational, whether you are a small guy in the village, it must benefit all of you. So these rules of origin actually plays to that, in the sense that we are talking about value chain. And I talk about, let me talk about cigarette again. I don't smoke, but let me talk about it. Let me use it. You are selling tobacco in a village in some village in Africa. You have no idea about Accra. You have no idea about CFTA, but you should benefit from the CFTA. How do you benefit? If I'm making cigarettes in Nairobi, and I know you have got tobacco in a small village in Kenya, Migori or somewhere else, I will go to Migori, I buy tobacco, I come and make cigarettes to export to a country in Africa. So in that case, you will, the small man, the SM fellow, is going to benefit from the CFTA by virtue of fitting or rather joining the value chain. So you just join the value chain and you find yourself in the CFTA without even knowing what the CFTA is. So the MSME are also benefiting from this. The very good example is the tea that was sent from Kenya to Accra, to Ghana. The tea that was sent from Kenya was from the small-scale farmers in Kenya. They were not from the big multinationals, the trade rules. They were from the simple guys in the village who are harvesting small quantities, being collected by an association and then processed and sent to the CFTA. So you see, they're already benefiting without even knowing what the CFTA is all about. So the MSMEs are also benefiting. And I think this is one of the things that I think all of us in Africa, we are trying to promote this so that each and every one of us participate in this and benefit from it. How are they going to be supported now? I think they are going to be supported. One of the things that will be done is sensitizing them. And I like Rose, you say that part of the things that you're doing is sensitization. This is something that needs to be sensitized on them to know that there is market for this and they need to expand their production. They also need to go into even small and many other different products that can be consolidated and can be sold in Africa. And I think these are the things that are being done by all of us as a parallel agenda, apart from now the main the challenges. Let me first of all say that the implementation of the CFTA has just started. The trade, I mean, the summit decided that we need to start trading under the CFTA as early as 2021 January, but the trade did not start until the other day when we started under the guided trade initiative. Just 1 second. Just 1 second. Someone wants me to address. Yeah. sorry, madam. I'm in the office, so someone was
Okay.
like, you need to address me.
Yeah.
So I was saying now the trade just started. So under the guided trade initiative. So already I don't think there is any, we have received at all anyone saying that there are challenges in terms of the implementation of the rules of origin or such like well, let me be honest, I've not heard about it. There could be, but I don't know whether there is. So basically, I cannot talk about the challenges in terms of implementing the rules of origin in the trade that has just started. But I must also say that the CFTA Secretariat is going around, I think there are about 6 or 7 countries that are part of the guided trade initiative to do exactly what you are asking, to find out if there are challenges in terms of the implementation of the rules of origin under the CFTA. Just to look at the compliance. Are you complying or you're not complying? Are there challenges? And once we see the challenges, we should be able to deal with them in terms of what should be the solutions. But I think for now, I think if you ask me, it's still too early to talk about the challenges. But I think that team that is going around may be able to identify 1 or 2 challenges that are there.
Okay, thank you. So I think I'll just quickly go to the chat and see the questions that are there. We have a question. We have a question from Dr. James Wangombe, and he asks, does labor have any significance in the rules of origin criteria? You can take down the questions and then you can answer all of them together. The second one is from Soji Awogbade. He asks, how regularly are rules of origin revised, or do they remain static, especially as to manufactured goods? We have Tekeshua Chigumira is asking, to what extent can rules of origin become barriers to trade? Can rules of origin be designed to benefit few member states, especially the outstanding rules of origin under the CFTA? Then we have Fidel Wimana is asking, I would like to ask the percentage of raw materials a product must contain so that it can be considered as an African product. For example, a product can contain 80% of raw materials from Africa and 20% from China. From this scenario, how can rules of origin be identified? So those are the questions. Then we have from Soji also is asking, how do MRAs fare with rules of origin? So those are the questions that we have. So we only have 7 minutes. I request you take 6 minutes or less to answer, and then we can close our webinar for today.
Okay, thank you very much once again. Let me start with the labor issue. Does it have any significance in the rules of origin determination? No, okay, labor issues entirely in the CFTA, I think does not feature mainly. But in terms of the rules of origin, we don't consider labor issues. We leave the labor issues to be dealt with under the individual or the particular specific what we call specific frameworks, because we know there are frameworks, or rather there are forums where labor issues are dealt with. So the rules of origin does not talk about labor issues at all. Now, how regularly the rules of origin are reviewed, or rather amended. Now, the rules of origin that we are talking about, there is a mandatory review after every 5 years. So after every 5 years, there has to be a review. Whether there is any country that is asking for a review or not, they must be reviewed. Why? The scenarios could be changing. What you think that we need to use raw materials from Africa this time, maybe in the next 5 years, you will be saying that this material is completely exhausted. So can we open for materials coming from outside? So you look at the fundamentals that are there at the time that you are negotiating. After 5 years, you will also look at those scenarios. And also this one actually applicable to those sectors, sectors like textiles, where you could be saying that we need more flexible rules here. But now in the next 5 years, you will be like, no, we need to develop our vertical integration. So we don't need to talk about flexible rules anymore. So there is a 5-year mandatory review clause. But just to say, if there is anything that is not working under the rules of origin, anytime a country can request for a review for that particular chapter. And then in that case, there will be discussion to see how you can, whether you need to do it and how you can do it. So that one is also there. Apart from now, the 5-year mandatory review that must be done. Barriers to trade, I said the tariffs in an FTA are very critical, but the rules of origin are equally important. How are they equally important? If you have got rules of origin that are not well crafted, which are complex and are not user friendly, it becomes a non-tariff barrier. And for those who are in different regs, a number of non-tariff barriers actually emanates from the rules of origin, which is a matter that we will be confronted with. So actually, rules of origin can become a non-tariff barrier because of maybe disagreeing in terms of, yes, you are saying that you have added this particular value, but you have not. So that becomes a barrier. Benefiting, can the rules of origin for the outstanding matters be developed to benefit a few countries? The answer is no. These rules of origin that we are talking about are being owned by all the African countries, the CFTA countries. You must own them. It cannot be like, yes, let me agree because you benefit and I don't benefit. We have all agreed that these are the rules of origin we are using. And that is why the two chapters, or rather two sectors, are outstanding, because we have not agreed on, we have not reached a compromise, or rather a meeting point. So there is no way you can develop rules of origin to benefit a few countries. It cannot happen. And I think the last one is about what is the percentage in terms of raw materials from within or from without. I think the answer to that is that it depends on which product you are talking about. We are talking about textiles, they've got different. We are talking about chemicals, machinery, they are different. And not all of them talks about percentage. Some of them talks about a process. If you have followed this particular process in manufacturing, for instance, chemicals or other minerals or even textiles for that matter, you will be talking about a process. You will not be talking about a percentage of raw materials. In other cases, you'll be talking about if you are changing in terms of the tariff classification, where the raw material is in another heading and the final product is in another heading, you will talk about that change is enough to consider that product to be substantially transformed. So it doesn't talk about percentages in all the cases. There are a few areas where we have percentage, but in areas where we have a percentage, we are talking about getting about 70% of materials from outside Africa. And then in that case, you'll be adding 30% from within. In certain cases, we have got 60 from outside and then 40 from within. So it depends. It depends on a particular product that you're talking about. And I think that is what Madam Rose was saying. We can circulate the Appendix 4, which has got very clear criteria in terms of all the products that you are interested in. The last question I did not, is it talking about MRA? Which
Yeah,
recognition?
Yeah, but I think the question was, how do MRAs fare? Like the relationship between MRAs and the rules of origin.
Okay, MRAs and the rules of origin, I think I don't see any connection because MRAs talk about mutual recognition agreement. But rules of origin is talking about how do you confer a product to be an originating product. So in that case, I don't see how this maybe in the trading services, Madam Chair, if there is a link in the rules of origin for trading services. It's basically an area. It is not an area that we can talk much about because also it is a little bit controversial for that matter.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we have reached the end of our webinar today. I'd just like to really appreciate Mr. Rotich for taking time to just explain how the CFTA rules of origin was arrived at in terms of negotiation, what they are. And we will be sharing the appendix so that you can have a look at the specific product that you are interested in. Next month, we'll be having a webinar on AGOA, just to help us understand AGOA and how we can be able to benefit from it. And we'll continue having similar sessions to just ensure that we are creating awareness on some of these opportunities that are there. So thank you so much for all those who attended today's session. There will be a recording on it on the TradeSmart Facebook page, so you can go back and just replay it if there's something that you did not understand very clearly. And just like to wish you all a blessed evening and morning for those who are in different parts of the world. So thank you so much and have a blessed rest of your day.
Thank you very much, colleagues, and thank you very much, Madam Rose, for this. It was a pleasure engaging. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.